And there we are, and we're live, and nobody's here but me. Just little old me. Let's start streaming. Huh. I drove all the way back to be in town for this, and nobody's here. Oh, people popped up. Robert, Glenn, hey guys. Then I got a treat. What song is that? Ooh. Oh, okay. Hey, Lacey, you guys must be on the road. Does anybody know what that is? No. Okay. Anyhow, that was our sweet musical moment. Um, there we go. Trying to, are you trying to bring back the Dutchman? That doesn't, I don't even know what you're talking about. Hitting the road in the traffic. So Lacey and David are in Arizona, and I believe you guys are going to Prescott today, which was kind of funny because I was up by Prescott up in Mayher earlier, and then they were someplace, and now they're heading back up that way. So I was thinking earlier today is that maybe we could have. I thought they were leaving earlier today, so I was like, oh, I could just catch them someplace at Sunset Point or Cortez Junction. But no, Jax is here being a needy boy. So, the kind of music you were playing, if you don't know what it is, come on. Anyways, so my keyboard skills. But anyways, that was, yeah, what a, be a good theme song. Anyhow, with all your knowledge, experience, and love of the mountains, will you something? Will you at some time self call yourself Doc? No. Trevor might. He could. He might be Doc Tuttle when he has his doctorate. He's supposed to start his doctorate here soon, so he'll be Doc Tuttle. I'm just waiting. Wayne, do you know about where the old building is in Scottsdale? The Don's Sportsman's old Taco Bell that's going away? No, but I know there was the Sportsman's Club. Um, there was a lot of old buildings. Getting my drinks. No, and I'm kind of flying blind because usually we have a set of notes and there's some things from the week previous, a few questions, things I go to follow up, and Phantom of the Opera. No, it was Perfect Strangers by Deep Purple. Phantom of the Supers. If I could figure out, and I could have set a drum beat, I would have done that and then had the guitar here and then started the guitar part, but such a cool song. Don't everybody go away and leave and figure it out. But anyways, cool song. But anyways, I usually have that list of stuff to touch upon from the week before and stuff and little things. And we were going through here. We had to do this day in the superstitions and a bunch of stuff over the week we were touching on, and I don't know where anything is. So it got all moved around, and I was going through the Fred Guyry slide collection. I have 40 or 50,000 slides in office boxes, and I've been going through those. A lot of stuff that doesn't need to be preserved or saved. So I've been going through finding stuff and making sure I've set aside and saved certain ones, obviously. And for the Dons, he was a member of the Dons, Arizona. was also an architect. Phoenix College, Phoenix Union High School, Arizona Public Safety's buildings, Northern Arizona University. Did a lot of the architectural plans for a lot of buildings, but as well was a member of the Dons and a historian for the Dons. And his collection was laying around, and all that stuff was just overwhelming to someone. I decided I'll digitize it, but the first way to go to digitize it is you have to go through everything to see what you want to save. So I saved, I got a list somewhere here. There's 8,000 I already digitized. And then I got to go back through the next 30,000 to go through those, which I'm down. I think I got everything straightened out, and I have about 7 or 8,000 set aside to go through one by one still. So I'm working my way through it. That's the problem with having archives and stuff, is there's a lot of tedious work of going through and then making sure you file it, and then in some cases say, well, I need to put this in different files because it belongs with this, maybe it belongs with that. And so you're slowly pulling things together. Right now, as far as the archives I have, which is 5 filing cabinets and then office boxes, I kind of got an idea of how I want to set it up. And then if people are looking up certain things, it'll be easier for me to look up. Right now, everything is just there, and I have to go through cabinet after drawer after drawer after drawer to find stuff. The Dutch stuff is a little easier, except about 6 boxes of it in one drawer. So it's kind of scattered too. I want that kind of set up a little better. So we did have the idea of putting it in notebooks. Jack Sanfelice did that with some of his collection, but that's rather expensive, the notebook and then the plastic and then separating things. So I might do that with certain specific collections, say something pertaining documents to Jacob Waltz or Julia Thomas or this or that. But then there's other things, and I'm like, there's just too much stuff. Like Adolph Ruth, that's a lot of stuff. Man, there's a couple big, thick files of all the documents and stuff. So going through that, hey Tony. So there we are. So that's been the kind of week it's been. So I'm getting done with a number of projects. So most everything seems to be functioning and working. And if you hear a buzz behind me, that's because it's now time for air conditioning. I didn't say the temperature today, as we usually talk about the temperature, because this is the time of year it's 98 degrees today. So the temperature's coming up. It was finally time to put on the old AC now. Well, it's not old, it's pretty new now. But, yep, it's that time of year. So we're going to try to keep things cooled down. We got another month or so of cool mornings. And it was kind of nice this morning. So, and like I said, I was up in Mayer, but it warmed up. Uh, but there we go. So, a lot happening, a lot going on. Um, so, didn't really talk to much of anybody this week, though. So much going on. There was just a couple people quick. It was a lot of work, and so between having all the work and then taking care of a few other things, hustling around and stuff, it was just kind of like, eh. And then, like I said, in the evenings, I just kind of sat out and went through slides. I had the little thing, and I'd hold them up, and if it was like indistinguishable, I was like, it's not a family on the beach or the dogs playing in the yard. I'd put it in this thing, and hey, Taz, and then I would go definite. I would, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. People sitting in the Don's camp. It's not hot yet, Lacey. It's warming up. 98 degrees. If it was 98 degrees all summer, that would be fine with me, man. That would be nice. Um, it was warm enough that you might sweat. It's not hot yet. Hot, you don't know yet. Um, hot is the 98 degrees is the low. But yeah, it was just kind of one of those weeks where there was a lot getting done and a lot I managed to do. But I think in hindsight, you would say, wow, you didn't really get a lot done. I actually did. So, and getting those files and that material together where we can put a lot of it on the website and share more material, that would be nice. So a lot of times it's just put away and it's just so difficult to get to. I got to open the boxes up and go through box after box until I find certain files. They're not alphabetized, they're just put in there. So I operate that old sportsman. If you're ever in the area, take a tour. It's an old Scottsdale history. I don't know where it's at. I'm trying to think because we went to some museums and stuff and some old stuff like that down in Scottsdale. Um, I don't know. So you'd have to tell me where it's at. You can always advertise. Hey, come on down. Yeah. See? So, anyhow, I don't know what I just did. I don't know. I hit something and something shifted, but my mic's working. I still see myself on the screen and nothing else seems to change. So, there you go. But anyhow, yeah, so there was a lot of stuff going on. And it's interesting seeing the photos and the slides and stuff because I'm going through and sometimes they'll have the year on the slides, and it'd be 1958, and then it'll be a group of people in the Don's camp or something happening specifically. There's some of the long hike where they were going up the Devil's Slide up to Geronimo's Cave. So those were interesting there. Are you guys still in the doldrums during the days? Doldrums? No, we're not in the doldrums when it's nice out. But yeah, it was a mild winter too. I would have to say that. So it's usually pretty crazy. I did do a thing for a paranormal group. It's called Almost Canon. Canon is in like canon of biblical books, collection, CANON. But I did a thing with them. So it's some kind of a paranormal group and all, a little different thing. And then there's a couple other groups. There's one I did some interviews and stuff on the phone I'm supposed to meet with again, and then another group I'm filming with. So for some unknown reason, all those people that want to go find creepy and unusual things seem to want me to do things, and I don't understand. So, but that's kind of a whole different thing. It's a very popular niche area, so quite much on streaming, not so much in the major market of anything, but it's kind of its own niche. It just seems very popular because of a few of the programs that are out there. Do you know anything about and his Chicken? I'm trying to look at that Chicken Namaza pick. His book. Oh, is that what that book's called? Hold on, I can't see it. I'm thinking I know what you're talking about. Let me get up here. Walk over here. Pretty sure I just saw it before. Huh. I know I saw it. Hmm. I think I know the book you're talking about, and I know I got it. I can't figure out where it is on the bookshelf. I thought I was going to jump right into it, and I was looking through and I didn't see it. Of course, there is one, two, three, four, about 7 shelves of Dutch hunting books. So, but I know the section it would be in because I have it arranged by popularity. Um, Kind of like Tom Collenborn stuff and Sim Zeeley, the Feldmans, Ron and Jesse's stuff, Barry Storms, kind of the I guess you would, the more popular known stuff, and then go through and keep Jack Sanfelice's stuff together. Then as it goes through, there's individual authors. People have written a book, but I got Mick McPherson stuff. But I know I just saw it the other day because I was moving stuff around there, and I was pretty sure I knew right where it was, which is why I got up. And guess what? I don't know where it's at. Sorry. If the stone maps were a fake, why do people? Because it's a very easy thing to explain. If I, and it's hard to do it just like this, but if I didn't know the area but had some slight familiarity with certain things and tried to come up with something that means absolutely zero nothing, the random reason behind it all, the chaos in it all, because it has nothing really specific, it would actually fit and attach itself. I've heard 100, 200, 300 theories. I've seen people bring stuff out, show me stuff of how it all connects, but they're always different areas, different things. And it's just literally that whole thing of the chaos of it all means, since there's no real specific, um, is what it is. I'm not going to get in an argument. Travis Tomlinson, the rock that the stone maps were made on, was behind his shop. His shop, he carved and cut and did stone stuff. He made a map, a map. Well, you can call it authentic. He made it, um, and then it was on a much bigger stone, and you can actually find that online. And then he started doing other maps and doing other things, and then he made the Peralta stone maps. Those he made more than one set. There's even a smaller set. And then one of the sets the family still has. Someone in the family still has one of the sets. The one you see is, and they even talked about, the family members talked about how when he was showing them, the heart fell out. And the reason it was broke is it fell out and broke. The one question I had never was answered to me is, why didn't he just make another one then, there and then when he was there? But he made those, and the family held on to them till guy wrote the book name. His name, he called himself Travis Marlowe. I can't remember his name offhand now. Anyways, he was hanging out with Robert Tomlinson, and that guy, if his name comes to mind. Anyways, he went out and convinced them to sell them the maps. And of course, Mrs. Tomlinson called him a sucker after he paid her for them. Because if you see them, there's no reason you have to buy them or own them. But they were used to part people with their money, which is a proven fact because they were on display in the Texas gas station. There's a lot of pictures and stories behind pictures that are not true, like the ones that, they're on the bumpers right after he removed. That's not true. That's not when that picture was taken. There's a couple pictures I've seen where they're just on the side of the house, stacked up. There was just too much, and this is probably 15, 20 years ago. There was too much stuff from people visiting the family coming to light of like, wow, he made these Indian heads, he made these other circular, he made a lot of stuff. And then finally, Frank was invited out and went out with some people, and they saw stuff, and Frank took pictures of everything out there. And I was like, that map isn't really a map. And he said, what do you mean? I said, that's wasn't ever really a map. He was forging maps that Tomlinson didn't know weren't actually real maps. He made a Julia Thomas map based on a rendering that someone else made exactly to the rendering, but he made it on cowhide and stuff to make it look like it was a real one, which Waltz's was supposed to be, I believe, not Julia's, but Waltz's was supposed to be on butcher paper, what he drew for Julia and Reinhardt. Julia, as far as we know, if she ever did make maps, they wouldn't be on leather and stuff. So Tomlinson didn't know all this because he only had a limited amount of information going through the area. So he was making these other fake maps. So that's what I tried to explain to Frank is the first thing that really should get into somebody's head is if a guy's making fake maps, he supposedly has the Peralta stone maps and they're real. Why is he making other maps? And then Frank took pictures of these sheets of paper, and they have all these symbols and drawings on them, and you can tell it's like a blueprint of what I might want to put on the stone. While I was looking at it, if you've ever been taking the stones in sunlight, you can see things that have been scratched on the stone, like you took a nail and very lightly we're trying to maybe I'll put this here. I wonder what this would look like, and kind of space stuff out. Well, the problem is those are very, very light in there. If you put them in sunlight, they pop. If you're taking high resolution photographs, and I took each map and took like 6 photos up close on the maps in the sunlight to try to get everything I could out of the relief, and you can see a lot of the stuff that was on these papers that's on the maps. But they're different orders, different things. So that's why I believe what I believe, because there's way too much stuff that just is going on. Tomlinson's manuscript, which is not the same as the book. There's the book by Robert or Travis Marlowe, which was this other guy. God, I can't remember. I can't remember his name. But anyways, Tomlinson wrote a manuscript, but it never got published. He took Garmin for some money, and a couple other people. But all that stuff was because of he saw an opportunity. Okay, so the music took the boat. People were never trained in navigation. Well, I don't know if he was either. Snakes, is this game season for them? Is this the game? What are snakes? I'm a Cubs fan. I'm from Chicago. The ghost just took the book. Stone maps are not fake. Again, I can explain it till I'm blue in the face. I'm fine with people. I'm fine with talking about it. I'll just explain what I know, what I've seen, photographs of the material I got, people I actually talked to, connected to the family. There just was a certain point. And it's like you get these people that are really into the stone maps, and I'm like, I have Travis Tomlinson's right here. In fact, I have Travis Tomlinson's original manuscript. Ugh. It's right here in this pile of things. There it is. But I actually have his manuscript. Well, I got 2 copies. I think I gave one away at the rendezvous too. But anyways, so there's 2 copies of the manuscript right there. I got tons of information on him. And again, there were several groups of people that went out to visit with the family, and then people started posting videos. I said at the time, and this is around 2016, 2017, I told the people involved that what they should have pitched is how it was kind of a con, and that would have made a great show, because when you see the intricacy and how it accidentally fell into place, it's mind-blowing. There is no one who's ever authenticated those stones. There's just made up fake stories about their authentication and all these other things. There's the ones where they were found in Mexico and under an altar. There's the one they were found somewhere else. They were dug up here. Bob Ward said he dug them up. Um, Different people said they made them, and Travis Tomlinson made them, and he always had them until a certain point. But yeah, he just saw something. He did something. Of the many things he did, that was the particular one. There was nothing quite like it, and it was very, very, didn't really capture anything specific, but it captured a whole lot in general, and that's why it worked. And you know what? For all of those of you believe and think you've solved certain things, Robert Kesselring thought he solved the whole thing, and his answers to solving are completely different than you, and he's a missile or a rocket scientist. So you're in good company. There you go. Let's see. I'm trying to catch up things. We're really lucky that you have the facts information. Well, I try to, because like I said, I have a lot of friends, and I consider there's people who are acquaintances, I'll say, or friends that are into the stone maps and stuff, and I will listen. And I've sat at Bob Schuess's dining room table, and we've sat there, and he's gone over all kinds of stuff with the stone maps, and I turned and I said, well, this is this, and I showed him pictures, and we talked about it for a while, and he goes, but see, and then he went right back to it. It's fine, It's just you can present what you can, and if someone wants to believe something different, that's up to them. You can only put the material there. I'm not there to educate people. I'm there to share what I can. Um, Then there's times where I'm a little more argumentative when it comes to people mentioning things that don't definitely exist, or other acts of fraud were committed, because I guess people have kind of perished because of the stone maps, but I don't think the stone maps are endangering anybody. I think most people working on them and all the material, and you can find something using the stone maps because of the randomness. It will actually work because you can sit there and go somewhere and then make it work. Really, I was very disappointed, and that's why if you watch Legend of the Superstition Mountains, Frank and I walk in a museum. Frank walks me over to the stone maps. I turn to him. The first words out of my mouth are, Frank, you know these are fake. And Frank says, yes, I know. It's the first time we talk about the Proto stone maps. I was not happy with them bringing it in because they did not want to talk about the background. They did not want to talk about the real history we knew. And I told them, you're going to find yourself getting a lot of people excited, but you're not going to be able to resolve a lot of it. And that's the problem with them, is people get really worked up, but it is what it is. Okay. And yeah, someday I'm going to have to do that. I don't really want to waste that much time, but I have probably 500 or 600 digital photos that I took in the sunlight and stuff of the maps, which are really, really detailed and very, very nice. Of one of a number of people that's actually held them, and stuff. And they have their, whether they're a hoax or not, they still are invaluable to the folklore and the mythology and the history. So I'm respectful to it and all. And maybe that's why I get along with all the stone map guys, because I am still going to be respectful to a lot of the material. I have the manuscripts, I share those with people. Um, I collect things. And that was the thing, is we got Travis Marlowe's book and that manuscript, and we gave it. I don't know who won it, but someone got those two pieces together, which is a really nice prize. I think we gave, God, what was it? Sims Ely's book with a copy of the Bark Notes. I think it was something like that. We paired some things together that we thought would go together really, really well, because I wanted people to kind of have something kind of like to learn from. So there you go. And I can't remember who won. We should keep track of who wins stuff. Let's see. Grind holes or molds for casting gold. Yes, I see that on TV. That drives me nuts. And you can tell that to people, and it doesn't matter. Saw one of the mystery shows on the History Channel from 2019 where you were helping those guys who had a map, took them to a spot, showed them how. Oh, that must have been Unexplained and Unexplored. They were on Science Channel. That was Emiliano and Justin. Must have been those guys. I took them to Japan. That was actually one of the, not backhanded, but really nice compliments I ever got from Frank, because I did the show and I did the panning on the show, and I showed, and we filmed some of it on my phone and stuff, and I showed Frank and I said, how did I do? Because I learned mainly my panning techniques I picked up from Frank and Woody. And Frank said, you did really good. That was a good job. And I was like, holy crap. Because I can count on one hand the times that Frank said good job to me. So I knew I must have nailed it, man. So that was really nice to compliment. But yeah, I worked with those guys. Those guys were, it was tough because they were on a very limited time, and there was a lot of stuff we left off. They left out of the show. They really wanted to run with the earthquake theory, and I kept telling them, I said, just look, there's too many rocks balancing on rocks that five of us could push off. I don't know how that theory really works. I said there's way too many problems with that. And it's been millions of years those rocks have been sitting there. So, anyways, but I tried to send them out to several other sites because if the show continued, they were going to come back. And one of the things was the spiral staircase. And Justin and Emiliano, with directions and a map and GPS coordinates, couldn't find the spiral. So I kind of gave up. So the guy from the Explorers Club couldn't find that. So, you do know Navy trains. Okay, well, okay, that's good that they do that. How many tons of books do you have on Jacob Waltz? Well, I don't have. There's only a certain amount. anything that's considered the general lexicon about the Lost Dutchman Mine and Jacob Waltz, I have. Um, I'm only missing. I'm trying to think of what I'm missing. There's some stuff that's newer in the last 10 or 15 years. There's a few here and there. But everything from the early on, like Trail of the Dutchman and Lost Gold and Superstition, all the early stuff, on Mike Burns stuff. I have all that. I'm probably pretty complete up into the 2000s of anything released, even manuscripts that were unpublished. I made copies and have copies of those. Greg Davis has probably the most complete library, and I always look through his to see because I won't carry. There's only a couple books, and they were accidental fictional books. There's a lot of fiction on the Lost Dutchman Mine. Unfortunately, I've ended up with a few of those, and the guys have signed them, so I keep them. But yeah, there's only a couple of those. I've tried to read them. Kay Kizier's stuff, which I read. That kind of was the end. I found a lot of the Dutchman fiction is really terrible because if you know the history and so forth, they don't really put the history together, except for Helen Corbin did with Center's Gold type thing. But I would think I got just up around 2000, early 2000s, everything released. And then there's here and there, I sometimes wait. There's a few, I know, was it Danny Adams did the Dutchman Lies and a couple books on that. I think I got one of those. I got Mitch Waite's stuff. So it's pretty close to complete. And there's a gentleman by the name of Doug Stewart, I believe. It's Doug Stewart. If you look up Bibliography of the Lost Dutchman Mine, he has all the books released about the Lost Dutchman Mine, the Superstition Mountains, fiction, nonfiction, and everything. And he keeps it current constantly, what he finds. I've used that list. I have it printed out from before, but I've used that as a litmus test of making sure what books and manuscripts I have. So if it's a non-fictional piece, chances are it's on here, and some of the manuscripts are filed away. Like I said, I have 2 copies of Tumlinson's manuscript sitting here, but I don't know how many books there are because there's a lot of books. I have multiple tomes. Um, like Tom Cullenborn's Ride Through Time, I got different editions. There's special editions and stuff, so I have some of those. Jesse did a leather-bound edition of his book, the hardcover for, is it Dutchman's Trail? So I have that along with Dutchman's Trail and Jacob's Trail and all that. There's an expanded edition, I believe, of what Ron did. So I'll have multiple copies. I have multiple copies of Coronado's Children, first editions. Um, so there's some books I'll have multiple editions of, and then there's some books that I just have one book alone. But I've always tried to collect 3 because I have 3 children. So I figure if my children ever want to split any of this stuff up, they should be able to have the opportunity. So there's 3 books by Blair, 3 by Tom, 3 by Thomas Glover of his different editions, except Trevor actually has his editions. He's been fortunate enough because of stuff he's done with people. People have given him his own copy. So he has his own copy of Jesse's book and Ron's book, and a couple of Jack's books, and Carlson and Elizabeth Stewart's and Thomas Glover's. So Trevor has his own copies of some of those. He's been gifted and so forth, signed to him. There. David won those. Okay, David won those. Okay, so Lacey, let me know. Did Brownie Holmes ever search for the LDM with her? No, he never had anything to do with those guys. None of those guys had anything to do with each other. Brownie searched a bit solo and searched with other people. Herman Petrash searched with Andy Sinbad. Well, he searched with George Collinborn, of course, as well. Sim Zealy, Jim Bark. I mean, Herman searched with quite a number of different people and worked with different people. Brownie did not associate. I don't know if they ever met each other once. Probably because of Reinhardt, because not of any other reason than Reinhardt said Brownie's dad, Dick Holmes, never met Waltz. And Reinhardt was pretty clear on that, and he said they never crossed paths. There was nothing there. And Herman would have been just like, there's no reason. So there wasn't competition. It was just kind of like, yeah, we don't need to talk to you. We Jacob Waltz told us this stuff. We don't need to confuse it with your story. So that's what I believed happened. Clay pretty much was in Brownie's corner, but he did meet Herman. So there's a lot of people that worked with Brownie met Herman at one point or another. But hope that makes that. Okay, so yes, those guys. Greeting, Wayne. Gil Gold Prospecting, San Antonio, Texas, where every day is a golden day. Hello, everybody. A cold beer at the Wayne Show. Life's good. I don't have cold beer, but I try to stay sober for these. Maybe I will see you next week, Wayne. Got stuff to do. All right. Well, you can always see me because I do live, and it's easy to see me because I'm on camera. So there you go. But I hope you're well. I hope everything's going good with the family and everything, and with yourself. So, Robert Porch found my first Prince Albert can in the mountain. That's always kind of fun when you find the Prince Albert can with the claim papers. I found the one once where it was literally balsa wood. They put it in upside down, but it got enough moisture in it, and it got smashed hard enough that it became particle board. And so I took it out. It was just a chunk, and you could not read nothing of it. It just literally was a piece of wood at that point. Is it true that old miners sometimes etched a Y in stone to denote gold nearby? Sometimes. I mean, yeah, the problem is the guys would write anything in there. They, I've seen all kinds of stuff in the mountains. Jimmy was here. Kim retracted his message. Kim been drinking. Kim back on his meds. Said something, and before I could get to it, he took it away. Did you like Jack Sanfelice's newest Dutchman book? Do you agree with that version of the story? No, no. My favorite book by Jack is When Silver Was King. I liked what he did with the Silver King mine. Um, Jack's my friend. I got most of his books, if not all his books, and I don't have a problem with Jack. People can write. People generally write their opinions of pieces. Um, Jack's rather excitable about some stuff and all, but he loved to come out and do his presentations and talk and do his things. But yeah, people always ask me what books to recommend, and when I'll say, always in there will be Helen Corbin's Center's Gold, because I think it's really well done, and Jack's When Silver Was King, because I really like that book's got information in it that's not available in any other book anywhere. So those two like that. So that's my book of Jack's. He has a new book out. His new book's about him being a cop. Frank supposedly wrote a chapter in it, or dictated a chapter. I don't know. I don't see Frank writing a story out. The Bob Ward shoot every cactus he saw, probably, and any bottle he saw, empty bottles. So he didn't shoot the full bottles, but I do have one of the ones he missed. But yes, he appeared to shoot everything. Anytime you get near the area where he was at doing something, you find holes in cactuses. You find a whiskey bottle or a beer bottle eventually, and you always find holes in cactuses. It's just like, man, the guy could not stop himself. A lot of Bob Ward lead in a lot of the cactuses. Hey, you going tomorrow? And when the hell is the rendezvous? I hope you mean. The rendezvous will be in November. We'll release the dates here. My freaking keyboard sucks. When's the rendezvous this year? I'll release the rendezvous in the next week or so, because I got to make the confirmations and everything with the Dons. There's nothing tomorrow. You didn't get the new newsletter. That got moved till next Saturday, Kim. So it's next Saturday, because there was a funeral. A bunch of people were attending, and they were not going to be able to make it. They got a hold of me and then put a new newsletter out. And in the new newsletter, it's updated till next Saturday. So the meeting, isn't there a meeting? Yes, there's a meeting next Wednesday, and then the outing is Saturday. That's secret Dawn stuff we're talking about. So, yes, so Not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And I am going because I was told we were going because we had to miss it last time because of graduation. The kids weren't graduating. Well, yeah, well, you know what? If you bought a non-refundable ticket, go or else make the family's name first last name starts with G pay you back because you they tell you to do stuff like that, and then if you do it, then they kind of yeah, no, they called me and asked me, and I told them I didn't have a problem. I thought they did it with everybody that they thought was going, and then it came out in the latest newsletter. They redid the newsletter. Is there any history about Holmes and anybody that helped Holmes to take the gold from Julia's home? No, there's no. That's only the only person that story, and this is one of those weird things. The only person that says Holmes took the you shocked me, buddy. Um, the only person that says he took the gold and all that, and that story comes from Dick Holmes. Dick Holmes is the only source for any of that. People will try to work their way around it. If Dick Holmes was there when the gold was turned in, or if he assisted in it with someone else, who knows? But Dick Holmes leaving with the gold and that whole thing is a fictitious story. I've heard Julia came home after the funeral and it was gone. Um, Julia was at the house and it went missing after something else. I've heard 4 or 5 different versions. She blamed Reinhardt, but then realized, how the hell did he do it? Um, Dick Holmes claimed he took it from the room in the back of the bakery, and then he took it from the outbuilding out behind the bakery, and then he took it from out by the back of her house, and his story changed. Um, which is one of the problems with Dick Holmes' story is him, Brownie, and his wife all told different versions of their same story. Why if you take what Brownie says or anything one of them says at any given time that this is the true story. The problem is all the ones before were just there was no reason to change anything in the stories. That was the most ridiculous part of it all. Um, None of the stories made sense. So you get the non-refund. So there's nothing of it. People said there was a court case and the town was divided and all this. I went through all the newspapers, all the articles, all the family histories, everything. There is nothing about any of that. That is literally someone just made that crap up, and then people have passed it along, like other things, like kind of like Reinhardt and Herman. They butted heads and never spoke to each other again. Yeah, they went out and filed mining claims, and other things happened. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. People try to change the narrative of the documented history, and they want to always change that because they want their story to be right. Sometimes it's just not right, man. You find out information and go, oh wow, we were misled by other people. I mean, Waltz didn't, Reinhardt didn't, Julia didn't. They weren't trying. They were just trying to tell people this is what we were told. When is it? When is it too hot for Wayne Tunnel to go out in the desert? I won't go in after the end of May anymore. I probably June. It depends how the weather is though in the mornings. But I'll go out in the mornings and stuff. But yeah, after that one year in July, mid-July, I went out. That one I've kind of like, but see, I have to be out in the desert anyways, work-wise and stuff. So go figure that. But as far as hiking, that doing that kind of thing back in the superstitions and stuff, I kind of like figure I just go by the temperature. So if we have a very hot summer and it heats up early in May, that's the end. And there'll just be a date where I just realize I watch the nighttime and morning temperatures and the moisture's gone, and I just realize that's it. So I don't think there's a date. I think it's just because some years I've hiked into mid late June, and the year I did that, I think we had a nice year, a nice spring, and about mid June, I was just like, well, that's it, wrap it up. And then I was out filming the pilot for the TV show in July, and then we filmed in August, September. I mean, there was never any time I wasn't in the mountains at that point. So, but part of it was the show is the reason I was out there. But I would never want to do that again. And I told them that was a ridiculous. Ridiculous thing. Wasn't there a court case called between? Find the files. Find them, and don't find something that's on record or documentation or filed or something real. Not this, and I won't say his name, but I'll type up something myself and say I found it in an archive and show you the actual. I don't want that. I want to see, I've looked because I heard that story myself, and it was like the town was divided and all this stuff. And then I heard all this stuff about this and the feud and this and that. And then it's suddenly Reinhardt going, Dick Holmes ever met Waltz. It was in the afterlife. And that's his only statement on it. And I don't think there was. I think that became a thing after the fact. Because in the newspapers, Holmes, they all talk about it. Nobody talks about Julia Thomas. Julia Thomas's stuff is in the early 1890s. And after she talked, I think she got quiet. So I think the thing you have to look at is Julia's talking privately to different people. And sometimes in the newspaper accounts, you can tell, oh, they're probably talking to Julia. But that doesn't specifically mention her. And then they went through the about 1900 to about 1905, 1907. There's a little religious thing, kind of throws everybody off. And that wasn't happening in the 1890s, by the way. I'm sorry. It might have happened towards the end of the 1890s, but it was not happening, all this other stuff. And so you read the newspapers, and Dick Holmes suddenly gets really brave. And then by around 1900, he's telling his version of the story. He never mentions really. That's when Julia becomes a big, fat, dark, black woman. Suddenly she becomes this other person. Reinhardt's now a drunk. He really kind of set a narrative for this stuff. Grocery boy, and that's what he was. And his daddy was really well off, and for whatever reason, that's he was able to get that out there publicly. So the Republic kept showing Dick Holmes' story, and then it later started showing Ida Holmes' story, then Brownie Holmes' version of the story. And the problem is, because back then people didn't collect all the newspapers and keep a little file on this stuff. Problem is, over the next 20, 30 years, every time you saw the story, it changed. And different people were there. Gideon Roberts wasn't mentioned. Brownie mentioned Gideon Roberts. Dick Holmes didn't mention him. And Ida Holmes said she was with Dick Holmes, and they were out front of the house, and that doesn't make sense. Yeah, and none of it makes sense. Actually, what makes sense is that Dick Holmes was with Ida Holmes and Julia came out, but we couldn't pin down. No one was ever to pin down. They even leased a house near Julia's. So we don't. There was a lumber yard, I believe, across from Julia's, but we tried so hard to find what the connectivity of Dick Holmes and Julia and them in that area and that time period were. And I know there's people that absolutely base everything on the Dick Holmes thing, but it was just there's nothing there. It's just nothing there. I mean, all there is just problems of if he was lying and how much of it was lies. That was basically the problem. And I will not say, someday I will talk about what people told me, and I actually have it on camera, so it can be used. And we decided not to use it once because sometimes people say things and it's their belief system and how they've always said it, and you don't want people to think they change their mind. Sometimes people personally have a different opinion. Tom Columborn really didn't touch anything on the stone maps. If you privately were sitting there talking to him about it, he was always like, fake, man, it's BS. But he would be very polite to guys with into the stone maps and stuff, and he never ever wrote anything disparaging really of it. So Tom always just kind of stuck to that higher road, believed the folklore and the myth was a big part of what he was sharing. So it was a little different. And I kind of believe that about a number of different people, and I think sometimes they're sharing that stuff. Um, Dick never lied to Brownie. That's what Brownie said. Your dad never lied to you, right? Your mom never lied. Your brother never lied. Yeah, that's like the weirdest quote ever. My dad never lied to me. How do you know? That's what Clay says, and I've always thought that was a funny statement. Brownie telling Clay, "My daddy never lied to me, and I've never lied to you." Okay, well, but your dad, if you're telling Clay this, your dad did lie to you. He didn't know, and I don't have a problem with Brownie on a lot of stuff because he's just thinking what he thinks is the truth, right? Who made the matchbox and the other jewelry? I don't know. I have it written down. They have receipts and all kinds of stuff and all that stuff. Is it in Glover's book? I know it's in one of the books. It might be in Glover's book, in his Golden Dream book. So, but yeah, they know where it was sent, the assayer, and how it was sent out, and where some of the pieces were made, and so forth. I'm sure Clay has all. It's Clay or someone also privately has spoken that. The interview you want, speaking of this, is when we were filming Legends, we stayed at Clay's one day, the whole day. And Clay went out under the tree on the north side of the house. I think it's a Palo Verde tree. We went and sat under the Palo Verde tree on the north side and got him a chair, and he talked for about 2-3 hours and just didn't really even answer questions. He just talked. And then we had lunch, and he was in a really good mood. And we were like, "Hey, do you want to go lay down? We got some stuff to do." And he's like, "Nah." He sat back down for a couple more hours and just talked. And it was a lot of this stuff about specific things him and Brownie talked about. That's all been recorded and preserved, and I can't get my hands on it. A&E and History Channel have those interviews probably sitting there on Sims cards, and they're not being used for anything. It's amazing. There is hours and hours of that stuff with Tom Collenborn too. So Tom Collenborn and Clay Wurst were professionally recorded, filmed, and audio. And I heard the audio because when they were talking with Clay, they let me put on the cans and listen to the audio that was coming through. And I sat there for a couple hours just listening to Clay's voice because they were saying, "Listen how good it sounds on mic." And I just sat there listening to him. And it was Christian Horner that was talking, asking the questions, but Clay turned and saw I was listening, and Clay started talking to me. And it was very interesting stuff, and I've heard that. There's a difference in talking to a Dutch hunter, like you're doing the TV show, you're doing the lecture, you're doing this, and then privately talking. And he kind of crossed a little bit of lines there, but it was a very interesting conversation because it was Clay questioning things during it. And that might be why they didn't use it. But I am going to always push because I'd love to get that footage. If nothing else, for now that Tom's passed away, to edit and put it out of something, because it was in his living room. They did his, and then Clay's, like I said, was under the Palo Verde there by his house, and it was awesome. I mean, the both of them did such. I didn't get to hear as much of Tom's because Tom acted a little nervous and would shoot you the stink eye if you were watching him while he was talking. So Tom had mentioned to me and Frank he didn't want us in the room. So I went in just to listen to what was going on. He had they always had that little yucca tree that they put on a Christmas tree, make into a Christmas tree at Christmas. It was behind him. But I remember it very vividly, and Tom was talking, and I really wanted to listen to it, but Tom said he said it was distracting for him to see me and Frank standing there listening to him. So we had to go out front on the porch. So I sat on the front porch of the house and smoked, and then went out back and messed around. But Clay's, I really got to sit there during it. And we did it inside too, but the big one I remember was outside under the Palo Verde tree because he went on for hours and it was really, really good stuff. That he was very detailed on a lot of relationships and different people. And they just let him run because they realized this is gold, maybe we can use it somewhere. And I don't think they used any of it. All right, I heard somewhere that Jacob started the one line. Well, where would you hear that? I mean, I would think that is. I think my general thought and feeling is the reason he went out there was because of something specific, and that's what he went for. And I don't think I think you can hear all the stories that people followed him into the mountains, and that he always had to ditch people following him. He was prospecting and all that. Go through the newspaper and the articles and the history of Phoenix is there. You're not going to find this stuff. When he died, there was none of these stories. It wasn't till after he died, then it was talked about when Julia went in the mountains, and then they didn't even get his name right. It was like, oh, he was well known in town, but there wasn't any of this other stuff. I think people thought, well, he lives pretty simple, and the few people thought, well, he used to prospect, he used to be an old miner, he would have a little gold. He was very good at hiding everything he had, and then once the story broke, all hell broke loose. So by 1895, remember he dies in 1891. 1895, hell broke loose and everything. You don't find that much stuff on him in 1892 and 93. And I've talked to Greg Davis about getting the Historical Society for these manuscripts and those little short things like Milton Rose's manuscript, Walter Gassler's, the articles, early newspaper articles, getting those available through the museum again because those are really cool to have for information. Um, then Ed said, "Yeah, wonder what Tom K saw in the staircase mine." Eh? I don't know if Tom ever commented on it. I've never heard anything commented. I never talked to Tom about it. By the time I kind of heard about it, and I didn't ever ask Tom about it because it seemed like a bullshit thing. So I don't think I ever mentioned it to Tom. So I don't know if Tom went out there or anything. I knew I talked to Shoes about it. I talked to Jesse about it. But with Tom, but see, when I first heard about it, Randy and I talked about going out, and we talked with Sal. And Sal had been out there with a couple other people after that. So the history, and that's one of the things I'm always trying to put the history together of it because we kind of abandoned the idea because it sounded like bullshit. So I was kind of like, well, there's a lot better things to do in the mountains than play around with that stuff. And in that case, I let it go, but later it came back and there was some more stories and I started recognizing some names around it. And that's when I got interested and told Frank, we should go out and check that out. And I asked Randy, I said, why didn't we ever? And Randy was just kind of like, I just think we thought it just sounded like a bunch of like folklore, you know? It's like we're gonna go out there and it's just gonna be this stupid hole and all this stuff. Yeah, I wish we would have went out then because we would have went down it. We would have had photographs from a whole different world. But for whatever reason during that time period, we just chose not to. Lots of Dutch hunters always search for a Weaver's Needle, and that's just they go around Weaver's Needle because they don't know any better. And I think because of Ed Piper and Celeste Jones and a couple other people really focused around it and came up with all kinds of stories about it, that is why a lot of Dutch hunters focused around it. I mean, it's hard to miss, but once they started creating their own little mythology around it, that was, hey, let's run around the plug. So, who made the Matchbox? Okay, we talked about that. Clayworth. Okay, then we did that. That worked. Okay, that, and then I always wonder what Tom Clay Worse is a superstition treasure. Clay is. He's a really super nice guy. By the way, the show you're panning in said Kay passed away in 2021. Clay. Yeah, that was weird stuff too. When they get stuff wrong, there. There's a show. It's World Greatest Mysteries. It's not the History's Greatest Mysteries. It was on Travel Channel, I believe, or Discovery. And if you watch it, and here's the way you'll know I'm in it, and Charlie LeSueur, they brought Charlie LeSueur out, who didn't know nothing about the superstitions, really. It was so funny because they brought Charlie, and I was, like, how did he do? And they're like, he did okay. And we were talking, but they have me with my name, and then they use a different name for me. Yeah, I don't know who they had me confused with, but that was a funny one because I asked Charlie how they go, how they put you up. Was it really cool? And he said, yeah, it was okay. They put me up in this like Hotel California, like fancy place from the 40s, 30s or 40s. Had a ballroom and all this fancy stuff, and the Hell's Kitchen. One of their chefs was there working and cooked my steak. and they gave me a private place to watch Monday Night Football. It was really crazy, and they treated me like a god walking the earth. And I guess Charlie was, you know, I don't know how it worked. Maybe he just flew in and flew out. I don't know whatever happened with that. But yeah, they brought him in, and then they brought someone else in. And I came in. They were filming in a warehouse where they do like sets and stuff. So, and we were working just in this indistinct background area for filming purposes. And I came in and I remember sitting there talking to meet everybody and talking kind of like, what ground have you covered? What questions do you need answered? What did you ask the other guys? Are you good with the answers and stuff? And they're like, well, we really don't know. And there was a lot of discussion. And I said, well, it'll work. I mean, you paid the guy. I mean, use what you can and all that. The problem is there's the folkloric thing and the mythology and, nonsense. And so I wanted to know what they wanted for the show. I'll have to keep that in mind for next time what that show is and what my name is in it, because I'm Wayne Tuttle, but then I'm something else. It's just crazy. But yeah, they had Charlie on there. That was right after he had started the Mysteries YouTube thing. So they showed him brief love in life. But then after that, a couple times I heard is like, yeah, they would talk to a few of these guys and be like, we're not sure about him. What do you think? And I'd be like, depends who you want. I'd always tell people Jesse if he's available or Josh. They're well spoken. I said that's always good. If you come into town, Shoes is good, Ron is good, but I don't think they want to travel. But I told them it was very limited on if you're looking for the class of historian expert and people who have some general knowledge. And I said, I'm just going to tell you people who I know, one, can speak well, have a vocabulary, can enunciate, have a voice, so that's going to work for you, have a background in knowledge, and then also know how to work this with you so you can come in, get it done, and move forward, which is what they want. And they're paying you a lot of money for just minutes, but they want whatever gold they can get out of you for that. And so there was a very limited number of people because Salvador needs subtitles. I learned early on. They just said Sal's just too, to your niche audience, he's funny, he's hilarious, people would love to see him. To the general audience, people would just turn the channel off because it doesn't work. And I get it, I understand. So I've been there with Sal sometimes and not know what he's talked about. The truth is, if Holmes with an L, well, if they didn't pay Tom or Clay, there's no. Well, they paid them. No, they paid them. There was a contract with Tom. Um, they just didn't use the material. So you got to remember, we're filming 6, 7 days a week, 10, 12, 14 hours. There's 2, 3 camera crews going at one time. So while I'm interviewing back behind Tom's house and Frank's interviewing out in front of the house, they're interviewing Tom in the house, and then we all get together and do a scene or two. There is so much going on all the time. There is, I would say easily Tom and Clay, there has to be 4 or 5 hours of interview footage that is just sitting there. And it's in a box probably. And I thought they would use it for other programs, if not for later on. And like I said, when we were doing Sunsets, we requested, could we have it, and then just run by them what we wanted to use. And we got a very evasive non-answer. So I know they know it's there and it's there, but they just, I don't know. The behind scenes stuff you did was great. The other thing is, if I could ever find someone and get someone in and do kind of a sneaky, someone working their archival projects, I'd be like, you know what? This is what I want out of there. Because there's some really good stuff that never was used. And if the SD cards disappear, they can't claim it because it just becomes whoever has the SD cards. Because there's no proof. There's nobody else in front of the camera. So it just looks like footage anybody could have shot. But yeah, I wanted to do right by Tom and Clay by using that stuff and putting it out there. And they could still use it later. Nobody, YouTube compared to national television. But yeah, it just never, they just did not want to play ball with me. And I was very nice about it. I was just like, I would really, what we were doing and so forth. And since the film was dedicated to Tom, I said it would be very nice to have that footage. Behind the scenes of great dinner, good show tonight, and thanks for letting me know, Robert. It's dinner time. Appeal to them. I I really will continue always until I don't have I have contacts in those areas. I don't have friends, and someday I will have a friend. And when I have a friend, I'll find out how that works, and whether it's by theft or someone releasing something to me. I understand why they wouldn't want to release it if they used it occasionally, but I don't think they're ever going to use it, and I don't think they're even going to realize it's there. And the one thing I learned is that if I was one of our cameramen, I'd be making copies of that stuff every day because there was some great stuff there. Yeah, I checked with everybody just to see what would be if there was anything available, and they're like, it's all with them. So the production company said no, it's all in their hands. That goes all to them, and so unless everybody's lying to me, but they never used it. So that's the thing that's a shame. So that would be great stuff. But if I could ever get my hands on some of that stuff, man, it'd be just nice to put out the interviews as is. There's no reason for anybody to even have to make a dime. Make a channel that's just ad free, no money, just and then just everybody link it up just to kind of like make sure everybody gets to hear them in their own words, which is important. So there we go. It's time. It's time. It's time. It's time for dinner. I guess it turned out okay. We got a lot of questions answered and a lot of stuff. And I hate to get into the Holmes and Stone map stuff. The only reason is just because I always feel like I'm being negative, but it's just you live and learn. And because you live and learn, and you have an understanding of certain things and material, I probably more than the people that really, really get into the stone maps have more stone map stuff, information and material and photos and video than any of them. So that's why I have my reasoning. I actually take all the material and stuff and use it and look at it. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But and I'm right, I'm right. But I've always tried to discover again what we talk about in here, trying to find that truth, what really, as much as we possibly can, what really happened. So really appreciate you including us with your great stories, great show, great weekend. You play those damn guitars. I will. I was playing the keyboard earlier, and Trevor's actually playing guitar. We worked out a duet. Be afraid, very afraid. In fact, his frets got some bad edges on them. I gotta try to file the frets a little bit for him on the ends, but to make them more comfortable for him. But he's actually every day Holmes, Holmes, Holmes. It's Holmes with an L. There, you got it right the first time. Holmes, Holmes. Anyways, everyone have a great weekend. Um, uh, and yes, snakes are out. Yeah, there's lots of snakes. Later, it's just like you made a statement, asked a question, and then said later and bailed on it. But yes, everybody have a great weekend. Catch us Monday on Chasing Legends. We will have some information on the schedule because there's a lot of graduations happening. And when the graduations are happening, probably won't do live because I have a graduation weekend and all kinds of things going on. Martin tuning for tonight, Dad Gad. Play some Cashmere. What else is Dad Gad? There's a bunch of songs in Dad Gad. Cool tuning if you got that Eastern mode going on. But Cashmere's the big one. Black Mountain Side, Swan Songs in Dad Gad. I'm trying to think of what else. There's a bunch of Black Mountain Side. White Summer from the Yardbirds is in Dad Gad. Thank you again. Yep, thank you everybody. I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna go get my dinner and settle in and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you again next Friday out here on Live Legends. Have a good